Great Britain 19th-20th century. First World War and Second World War. Great Britain was one of the creators of the international political system after the First World War. At the same time as the strongest European great power, Great Britain traditionally sought to maintain port of focus on the continent, alternatively supporting one country or another. A new full-scale war in the European continent was extremely undesirable for Great Britain from both an economic and political point of view. In 1933, the Nazis came to power in Germany, one of whose main slogans was revenge for the defeat in the First World War.
At the same time, the forced industrialization and militarization of the USSR took place, considering the Soviet threat to be quite serious. In the second half of the 1930s, the British government of Neville Chamberlain made concessions to Nazi Germany, which led to its strengthening as a counterweight to the USSR.
Pinnacle of this policy was the Munich Agreement, 1938. It was assumed that a stringent Germany would never sail remain under the control of the great powers, and first and foremost Great Britain. Germany's violation of the Munich Agreement, the division and seizure of Czechoslovakia in March 1939, in which the Reich was supported by Poland, a traditional ally of France, meant the collapse of British foreign policy. Germany had expanded the control of the great powers and was becoming the dominant force in Central and Eastern Europe.
Nevertheless, after the occupation of Czechoslovakia in March 1939, more than 2,000 gold bars worth £5.6 million, which were in London, were transferred from the account of the National Bank of Czechoslovakia to an account in the Bank for International Settlements, managed on behalf of the Reichsbank in August 1939. The Non-Aggression Pact was signed between Germany and the Soviet Union, which came as a complete surprise to Great
The
Britain.
secret protocols of the treaty envisioned the division of Eastern Europe between the USSR and Germany, including Poland, to which Great Britain had perfect guaranteed security. This meant the collapse of the inter-British foreign policy in Europe and put the Empire in an extremely difficult position. On September 1, 1939, Germany attacked Poland. The Polish campaign. On the same day, the government of N. Berlin sent a note of protest to Germany, followed by an ultimatum on September 3, then a declaration of war on Germany. However, the interim the German troops were busy in the east, in action against Poland. The Allied Anglo-French forces didn't undertake any active combat operations on land or in the air.
The decisive role in Great Britain declaring war on Germany was played by the United States, pressuring Great Britain that if Great Britain refused to fulfill its obligations regarding Poland, the United States would refuse its obligations regarding support for Great Britain. Great Britain was primarily a maritime power with a powerful navy. The basis of its strategy in European wars was the presence of one, or better yet, several allies on the continent who would bear the brunt of the war on land. Accordingly, Great Britain did not have powerful ground forces. In total, the army in the metropolis at the beginning of the war numbered 897,000 people. Together with the colonies, the ground forces amounted to 1,261,200 people. Since 1938, the main attention was paid to the development of aviation, which was tasked with defending the country from the air.
By the beginning of the war, there were 78 squadrons in the metropolis Great Britain during the Second World War. The morale in society was maintained at a fair lakes level, largely due to the media, newspapers flourished during wartime. Government propaganda was successfully implemented thanks to the work of journalists such as Charlie Masterman and newspaper publishers such as Lord Beaverbrook. Accommodating the demographic change in the workforce, variety industry grew rapidly and production increased by employing large numbers of people.
In addition, for the first time, women began to be employed on a large scale, forcing Parliament in 1918 to pass an act giving large numbers of women the vote. Newspapers flourished. Large numbers of workers were employed. By the outbreak of war, the British government's policy, as formulated by the ruling party, was against government interference in private business, in keeping with the Liberals' historical position as advocates of laissez-faire government. The policy of business as usual, as Winston Churchill described it in November 1914, had to be modified by the war. In May 1915, the Asquith cabinet was forced to resign due to a crisis in the production of artillery shells and the disastrous start of the Gallipoli campaign in the Dardanelles.
Willing to go to an early election, Expense relaxing agreed on 25 May to form a new coalition government consisting of his Labour Party and the Conservative Parties. Far from what were as part of a military political, the entire bloc constantly developing the country with its goal, defying the counter-powers, the German Empire, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, and the Belgian Empire. After the war, the British Army Force underwent a major reorganization. For example, the Royal Air Force was created. The number of troops increased. For the first time in the history of the country, forced conscription was carried out. With the outbreak of war, patriotic feelings with the entire country, social barriers between the social classes of entering England during this period were lowered. The talent beginning of the first world British propaganda poster. Companies men, Australia, Canada, India, New Zealand all answered the call. Supported by young lions, the old lion challenges his enemies. Go for service today.
Britain, led by Liberal Prime Minister Herbert Henry Asquith, entered World War I at 11 p.m. on 4 August 1914. In response to German demands that Belgium grant troops free passage to France, and following the expiration of a British ultimatum, Asquith declared war on the German Empire. The reasons for declaring war were complex. Under the 1839 Treaty of London, the United Kingdom had guaranteed Belgium's neutrality and independence in the event of an invasion, although the Foreign Office concluded that these obligations might not be fulfilled. Another reason was a moral obligation to France. Extensive secret negotiations between the countries had been going on since 1905, although most members of Asquith's cabinet were not privy to them until 1911. The lack of evidence that war was inevitable led to disagreements within the government. Even on 31st July, Herbert Henry Asquith's significant sacrifices had to be made to achieve victory over the enemy.
To prevent labor shortages and food shortages, the government passed a series of laws, such as the Defense of the Real Act, giving its additional powers to enhance the survival of its citizens. Will progressed the government's attitude towards change. The primary policy of business as usual, and many of the pre-war status quo under the government of Herbert Henry Asquith had to went down in favor of Tobin were under Prime Minister David Lloyd George. This was upset for the first time. Cities became the targets of air bombardment for the first time.
Lloyd George. This coalition remained in power until 1916, when the Conservatives became disillusioned with Asquith's cooperation and the behavior of the Liberals, especially due to the Battle of the Somme. The government fell apart as a result of political maneuvering by Andrew Bonar Law, the Conservative leader, Sir Edward Carson, the Ulster Unionist leader, and David Lloyd George, then the government's Secretary of State for War. Law did not have enough support outside his party to form a new coalition. On the other hand, the Liberal David Lloyd George, who had a much larger following, was able to form a new coalition government.
When Lloyd George became Prime Minister, he assembled a cabinet in which the Conservatives even outmaneuvered his own party. Creation marked the transition of government policy to a total war state, in which every man, woman and child must do their part to help the war effort. Moreover, the defense of the real act sought to centralize all levels of military and economic activity under government control after the end of World War I. After the war, the Representation of the People Act 1918 expanded the vote to a much wider section of the public, about married men over 21 and all married women over 30. Ultimately, this contributed to the collapse of the Liberals and the rise of the Labour Party in the 1920s. This was evident in the 1918 general election when Labour's poll numbers rose sharply from 6.4% in 1910 to over 20%, as the Liberal vote was split between those who supported and those who opposed the continuation of the coalition government.